deal with them in September rather than now. I want to acknowledge sitting at my right is John Jensen, the acting Chief Executive Officer of Metrolinx. We miss Bruce, but we wish him well in his new job in Ottawa, where we hear he's doing extremely well and crisscrossing the country on behalf of the Canada Investment Bank. He did a wonderful job for us for 6 years, but John's doing a terrific job. Thank you for stepping in.
Thank you.
I know before you started, you announced you're going to quit too. John's only on until September 1st, and we, as you know, are engaged in the search for our next Chief Executive Officer, which we plan to have that person take office by September 1st to allow John to reignite his retirement plans, which he was good enough to defer for this period of months, and is doing a terrific job on our behalf. So thank you very much, John, for what you're doing for us. I'm also delighted to say we have two new members of the senior executive team present. Peter Zuck is back there. Peter, if you stand up. Peter is the new Chief Capital Officer. That is, he's taken the job that John used to have as Chief Capital Officer. Peter is a Canadian with a fabulous record of accomplishment, primarily in the United States, in major infrastructure projects in the transportation field. You're going to be a fabulous addition to our team, Peter. You'll get to know everybody, and we're thrilled you've cast your lot with us. Peter started yesterday and will be here full-time from beginning very early in July as he closes up shop in Boston and gets going. So, Peter, thank you very much for signing up. And where's Anita? I can't see Anita. Anita Zolmanis is the new Chief Customer Experience and Marketing Officer. Anita joins us after a very long and successful career in the private sector. She's been with us now, I'm going to say 2 months, 2.5, 3 or 4 months. And I knew Anita in an earlier life of hers where we worked together at Torstar Corporation. And Anita's being given this a new position we've created with important responsibilities, and we thank you, Anita, for signing up. You're going to be great too. If you can bring to Metrolinx the work you brought to romance novels at Harlequin, everybody will be happier associated with us. Ian Dobson is here, I hope. Where's Ian? There's Ian Dobson over there. Ian Dobson served on the Metrolinx board for 3 years. And then retired from the board since our last public meeting. So I asked Ian to come back to this meeting so that we could recognize him for his commitment, for his service, for his contributions, and for his friendship. Ian is a long-standing, deeply expert commitment to city building and to the region. He brought all of that to our work. He brought to our work the importance of rigor of analysis, of evidence, of the importance of business case analyses. He, of course, is one of the leading experts in the region on commercial real estate, the impact that transportation and transit can have on its evolution and development, the importance of co-locating transportation infrastructure with employment opportunities in the area, and generally brought a passion for the success of transportation and transit and the city and the great region of Greater Toronto. He was a terrific member of our board, and we are very appreciative of Ian's service. Ian is not on the board anymore, but he's no less interested in the issues and will continue to contribute as a outstanding citizen in the area. And Ian, we thank you very much, and we're grateful if you would come forward and receive a plaque from us for your service. Why don't you say a few words?
Oh, my goodness.
And the camera's right on you.
Oh, dear. You know, since Metrolinx and the big move came to our community 10, 15 years ago, we've added 1 million people to the region. And by the time the work of our terrific staff and the organization of Metrolinx is complete on the projects we're doing, the region will be 2 million people bigger than when this organization started. It's a huge challenge to provide public transit to a rapidly growing area. And I hope that this organization continues to build on its success and its quality to deliver that service to the people of Ontario. On a personal note, I'm very honored to have spent as much time getting to know what a terrific staff we have and what a terrific organization we have. And I'm very pleased to have served the people of Ontario with you, Mr. Chair, and all of our wonderful board members that I've got to know over the years, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
And I know, Ian, this is irresistible material for you, so please stick around. Enjoy the morning with us. I should have said that Upcar Aurora is participating in the meeting, but he's online. He's on telephone because he's on the West Coast today. But is part of, so we have 100% attendance of the board today. Next announcement is 2 of our colleagues in the last month have become doctors. These were fast educations to doctor, but based on a lifetime experience. Mary Ann McKenna received an honorary doctorate from Laurentian University for her outstanding work in the field of architecture, which is celebrated not just nationally but internationally. And Bill Fish received an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from York University for his steadfast dedication to enhancing the York region community and all he's done to make his region, which houses York, a better place. So to Mary Ann and to Bill, congratulations to both of you. And then I want to say that we lost a board member in Ian, but we gained a board member. And we gained a board member in Kathy Bardswick, who sits 2 to my left. We're thrilled that Kathy has joined us. She worked as the president and CEO of the Cooperators Group, was extremely successful career in that private sector, but a unique part of the private sector with the complexities of a cooperative and stakeholder management, and she brings those skills. She brings her knowledge of risk and insurance. She brings her financial acuity. She brings her residents, her working residents in the past in Guelph and her residents in Burlington, Oakville. She brings an awful lot to the table for us, and we're thrilled that Kathy has cast her lot with us. We're so thrilled that Kathy joined us. Unlike any other previous director, she immediately got promoted to vice chair of the Audit, Finance, and Risk Management Committee to be responsible for overseeing all our work in risk management. So subject to the board's approval of that later today, Kathy, you're already doubling up in your responsibilities, and we thank you very much. Welcome to Metrolinx. I'm being fed stuff here which is next. I want to, as I always do, acknowledge correspondence received on matters on the agenda or related to the agenda. We have received 6 submissions, all of which will be publicly available, but they are, number 1, correspondence from residents of Old Riverdale, dated mid-March, regarding the impact of Go RER initiative on their neighborhood. And we've responded to that correspondence, and our response will be made public as well. We have correspondence from Lindsay Wigginton of the Pembina Institute and Michelle German of Evergreen Brickworks, dated June 23, regarding their report published with the title Getting on Board, Learning from Planning and Engagement around Rapid Transit Projects in Ontario, and we thank them for their work. We have correspondence from Rhoda Potter, President, and Randy McDougall, Vice President of the Agincourt Village Community Association, dated June 23, regarding community concerns about increased service levels on the Stouffville corridor, particularly in the evenings. We have correspondence from Kevin Montgomery and Chris Drew, who are the co-founders of Fight Gridlock in Brampton, dated June 27, regarding Kitchener CN Freight Bypass, hydrogen fuel cell technology, off-peak GO train services to Bramalea GO Station revitalization, high-speed rail, and the naming of Hurontario LRT vehicles. Kevin and Chris have lots of interests, and we're grateful for their interest in all those topics. We have correspondence from Michael Theodores, dated June 27th, regarding the proposed GO fare increase. And we have correspondence from the chair and CEO of the Roger Anderson of Durham, requesting a comment to an opportunity to comment on the business plan, which in part led to our decision to defer the discussion until the September meeting. That's all the correspondence I believe that we have received. And with those words of introduction, I turn to the CEO for his. Thank you, John.
Very much, Mr. Chair. So good morning and welcome. It's an honor to sit in this seat for the first time at a board meeting. And I take the helm as interim president and CEO at an exciting time for Metrolinx. Transportation continues to track as among the most important issues in the hearts and minds of residents in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. In this past quarter, we celebrated some corporate anniversaries. Metrolinx turned 11, Union Pearson Express turned 2, but the big story is GO turned 50. And that important milestone has us reflecting on all the hard work and dedication that our colleagues, both past and present, have put into connecting people and communities throughout GO Transit's history. We all know that GO Transit has been creating a more connected, integrated region since it ran its first trip back in May of 1967. It played an important role in building and shaping communities, giving people a safe, reliable, and convenient way to get to and from home, work, and school, you name it. It's been the transportation choice of many in the province. And the best is yet to come. Looking back naturally has us looking ahead to our plans for the future, namely Regional Express Rail. The GO Regional Express Rail program is the backbone of the next generation of transit in the GTHA. GO RER represents a historic investment in the future of this region, which will see GO Transit transformed from a commuter transit system to a truly regional rapid transit system. And the scope and scale are tremendous. GO RER includes more than 500 separate projects across more than 40 municipalities and is the largest single investment in rapid transit in Canada. A few weeks ago, we announced the commencement of the GO Rail Network Electrification Transit Project Assessment Process, and that will examine the environmental impacts of converting GO Rail corridors from diesel to electric service wherever possible. And we're working with Infrastructure Ontario and are moving forward with the procurement of companies to build the early infrastructure needed across the network to increase our capacity and increase more service. This quarter alone, we've issued the RFP for the Kipling Bus Terminal, and that'll connect GO, TTC, and MyWay. The RFQ for the Rutherford GO Station, and that has more capacity for parking, grade separation for increased service, and improved station access. The RFQ to upgrade the Barrie Corridor, that includes track and signal upgrades, bridge work, noise retaining walls, double tracking. It also includes grading between Union and Aurora. As we build the necessary infrastructure, we're able to offer more service. This past Monday, GO Train customers along the Stouffville line were given more peak and off-peak trip options, doubling the total number of weekly train trips from 85 to 170. On our rapid transit program, it's also making good progress with some important milestones to mention from the last quarter. The Eglinton Crosstown is coming along. The tunnel boring machines were extracted from the ground, and that signaled the official completion of the complex tunneling assignment of this massive project. Meanwhile, all stations are currently under construction. In March, we announced a battery energy storage system for the Eglinton Storage and Maintenance Facility to deliver this alternative energy solution that will meet the needs of the Eglinton Crosstown. Our recent agreement with Alstom has ensured that we'll have trains to operate when the Crosstown project is complete, as scheduled in 2021. And we're moving forward with more transit in Hamilton. The LRT project there received support from Hamilton Council as they voted to update the environmental project report addendum to include the 3-kilometre section of light rail transit from Queenston Traffic Circle to Eastgate. Metrolinx and the City of Hamilton are now working together to analyze the potential impacts of this latest development to the project schedule, environmental assessment, and budget. And in Mississauga, Infrastructure Ontario and Metrolinx shortlisted 3 teams to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the Hurontario Light project. Last week, we broke ground at the new Union Station bus terminal, a transformative project with 2 new buildings, including commercial, transit, and park space. Our recent partnerships with third-party retailers have enabled us to make transit even more convenient for customers. At select Shoppers Drug Mart locations, customers are able to buy, load, and set their Presto cards. A pilot has begun for Tim Hortons to sell quick, convenient food and drink operations at 4 GO stations. And of course, over the past 2 years, we've been working towards developing the next draft regional transportation plan. I'd like to thank our municipal partners, stakeholders, and the members of the public for their feedback and input. In particular, I'd like to thank the Residents' Reference Panel for their insightful comments. We look forward to bringing the draft plan to the Board of Directors in September. Now, I'd like to make just a few short announcements about our team here at Metrolinx. So, in recognition of some of our employees, Transit Safety Officer Peter Mohoila has been selected as this year's winner of the Roger Sear Award. The Roger Sear Award is presented to Operation Lifesaver partners and volunteers who have undertaken efforts to improve railway safety and encourage others to do the same. This is a well-deserved recognition of Peter's years of dedicated work as a rail safety ambassador for Metrolinx and Operation Lifesaver. Our very own Mary Martin, Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary, has been awarded this year's Canadian Lawyer In-House Innovation Award in the Law Department Diversity category. Congratulations are in order to you, Mary. Yay. Our Construction Safety Management Program received the Canadian Urban Transit Association's National Corporate Leadership Award for 2017 in the category of Safety and Security. Congratulations to Tom Goodbody, Director of Corridor Infrastructure, and his team. The American Public Transportation Association has awarded an AdWheel Award to Metrolinx for the Go Transit Customer Courtesy Campaign in the category of Best Educational Social Media. Congratulations to the Go marketing team on this achievement. And finally, the Metrolinx digital public consultation platform, metrolinxengage.com, recently received the Award of Excellence from the International Association of Business Communicators. Our platform complements our existing, more traditional public engagement activities. Congratulations to Judy Pfeiffer and the team in Communications and Public Affairs. Congratulations, Judy.
Judy.
So I'd like to say that that's quite a lot to have accomplished over the past quarter. We're making significant progress towards our mandate, and I'm looking forward to the connections we'll continue to create for the people of the GTHA. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Any questions for the CEO that you haven't had a chance to ask over the last couple of days? How do you like the job?
I love it.
Want to stick around?
Your wife will kill you.
Thank you very much for all of that. That brings us to the item 9 on the agenda, which Bonnie Patterson was going to move and Marianne McKenna was going to second, to appoint Anita as our Chief Customer and Marketing Officer and Peter as our new Chief Capital Officer. Is there any discussion or question about that? Any dissent? That's approved. Congratulations to both of you again, and thank you for casting your lot with us. That brings us to the Presto update. Robert Hollis, where's Robert? Take it away.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm actually happy to be here today to report on positive progress across all of the Presto fronts. As John mentioned, the exciting news for May was the finalization of the agreement with Loblaws to use their Shoppers Drug Mart stores for sales and service of Presto, so you can buy a card, load a card, set concessions. We've stood up 10 stores as part of what we call field trials to make sure all of our processes are working, and it's been perfect to date. We have minor tweaking of settlement and other issues to make sure when we start rolling out in the summer to dozens more stores across Toronto that it works perfectly for our customers. To date, we've already sold 4,000 cards through the 10 stores and loaded $250,000 in value. So we're also talking to our 905 partners and Ottawa partners about expanding the program to their regions in the future. So there's a huge opportunity for Presto. We were lacking a retail sales network, and we have a great partner to drive this forward. On to TTC. We continue to grow our volumes in the TTC. This chart's already out of date. Last week's figures are 1.44 million fares paid on the TTC. So we continue to improve the volumes. We're now doing regularly more than 1 million taps a day across the system for all of our partners. So the growth is there. We keep moving forward, bringing on more customers day to day. In terms of progress on the TTC, over the last period, we completed the civil works in 43 subway stations. TTC's installed their new fare gates at all the entrances of those stations. We're now turning our focus to the 26 stations, primarily in downtown areas, where we still have readers attached to legacy fare gates. Also in June, we introduced TTC passes onto the system, low key because we want to phase this in over time. We now have July passes for sale, so that's another big milestone for Presto to have passes out there. And with Anita's support, we have launched a education and communications campaign for TTC to start educating customers on the value of Presto and help move the switch from legacy fare media over to Presto over the next several months. In terms of TTC challenges, we reported last board meeting of significant issues we had with the deployment of 5,000 readers on surface vehicles with the TTC. Working with our suppliers, we've made dramatic progress at improving the reliability and availability of those readers on those vehicles, as well as the readers on the turnstiles and the 26 stations that we support. Our numbers now for all readers are well over 98% availability for fare revenue readers on the street, and well over 99.5% for at least one reader on each vehicle. We are still passionately working towards our goal of every vehicle having at least one reader 100% of the time, and all readers 99%. We're very close to that target. TTC continues to work with their suppliers on the new fare gates. New patches have been applied this month that are starting to show reliability increases for those fare gates. Coming soon on the TTC, as I mentioned, we're focusing on the downtown core primarily to move into new fare gates in those stations, with working closely with Andy Byford and his folks to try to expedite that work and achieve that as close to the end of the year as we can to complete the rollout of all devices. We'll continue the phase-in of passes. I believe there's something like 450,000 TTC passes. We'll be introducing auto renew, the Metro Pass discount plan over the summer months to gradually scale up, moving the passes over to Presto. The new and improved self-serve reload machines that were faulty back in the last period are in our labs and will be coming to a station near you in the near future, probably early in the fall. Meanwhile, those particular self-serve reload machines that were problematic last year are performing very well now, and we actually perform over 40,000 transactions a week on those 75 machines. If coming in later in the fall, we're actually working on full-function vending machines for the TTC as part of our commitment in the contract. Moving on to...
Just before you go on.
Yes.
With the fare gates, unlike the old turnstiles, which fare gates, turnstiles only went one way. You couldn't go through them the wrong way.
Correct.
If they were set that way. With the fare gates, on the subway last night, I noticed at my stop, one person was going through paying, and then they were standing on the other side and letting their friends come through by just continuing to open the gate. I showed at them and persuade them to run away. But then I noticed as soon as I left, they ran back in and went in. So is there a problem with these new TTC fare gates that they are more open to being taken advantage of than the old turnstiles?
Well, to your point, they are more flexible. You can't go reverse through a turnstile. There are special turnstiles for exiting the station today. So yes, these stations are ingress and egress, and in some cases, in other jurisdictions, you actually have to tap out to be able to do fare by distance. So that comes with the territory. These new gates have to be managed better. You can tune the doors to work in a certain way, and that's what TTC is trying to achieve right now. But at the end of the day, there has to be some level of oversight and enforcement.
Okay.
Great.
But they're on top of this, because this is gonna
Yes.
be a revenue loss.
Yes, and as you've seen I think you've seen in the press, is tuning these gates to have just the right responsiveness. People pushing on the gates, causing them to go into a reset mode. These are all the challenges of introducing new technology. But TTC's on that with their vendor, and I think you're going to see. I've actually seen personally improvements in their gates over the last few weeks as these new fixes have gone in.
Excellent, excellent, thank you.
So moving quickly to the negotiations with the GTHA and Ottawa, we're looking towards having a new 10-year agreement in place by October. All of the councils and Ottawa have approved the agreement in principle. Our teams are now working towards a detailed agreement, working with Mary and her team to get a contract in place by the fall. Part of that arrangement will be for us to refresh all of the devices in the 905 and provide them with a managed service similar to the TTC. Their devices are coming to end of life, and if we want to move into open payments and future products, those devices need to be upgraded. Just coming this July is our next tranche of software upgrades to the system, which will bring a whole array of new functionality for TTC. In particular, the highlights will be the express bus routes where you have to pay a double fare. There's a daily fare cap that TTC will introduce later on, so you actually max out on the amount of payment in a day, regardless of the number of rides. We also have the, as I mentioned, the Metrolinx discount program coming into play. There's improved web services. And this upgrade, like others, will be across a weekend. We'll give our customers lots of notice about that, but that's the next step in our getting to the end of the TTC rollout. This is well into wave 4 of wave 5, with only a wave and a half to go. The last item I wanted to raise today, there were a number of questions raised about Presto and the privacy of our customers' data. I want to express that Presto has always taken and continues to take data protection of our customers very seriously. We have and continue to be in compliance with the law. However, as questions have been raised, Metrolinx is undertaking a review of its policies. And Mary Martin, as our Chief Privacy Officer, is leading that process, and I think we'll speak to more details.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, I guess in our privacy policies, we're always balancing a number of priorities, all of which are important. Some relate to the safety of our passengers and the security of our vehicles. And of course, equally important is the privacy of our customers. So we're always trying to get the right balance in the policy, comply with the law. I think what we can do, and I've been grateful for the recent input from the media, is that we can be more public about publishing statistics of when we do get, or the number of law enforcement requests we get, and also to advise our customers that in some limited circumstances we will reveal limited personal information, such as a missing person case or a criminal investigation. Of the 33 requests we got in the last year, only half of those led to us releasing any information. It was released pursuant to a process where the law enforcement officer had to complete a fairly detailed form. We are going to be revisiting our policies. We did work with the Ontario Privacy Commissioner's Office a few years ago when we drafted them. We will see what we could do to improve them, if not the actual content of the policy, the disclosure of the privacy information. So stay tuned on that one. We expect to be rolling out some new processes in the fall, which will also address our understanding after we do some investigations of best practices in the area.
Mary, if I have it right, you're going to bring a revised policy which you'll post for public comment, and you'll bring it to the board for
That's right.
approval at the September board meeting?
That's what our plan is. And we are going to consult with the IPC again, who've agreed to provide us with feedback.
Thank you. So we won't discuss it today,
Right,
but we'll get a chance to discuss it in September.
absolutely.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Are you all done? No, don't leave. Have you finished your presentation?
Oh, yeah.
No, you're not leaving
But
yet.
that was my exit cue.
No. Questions to Rob? Still?
Yeah, so Rob, we get to 99% and we're almost there, that's great, but that means 1% it doesn't work. Either the Presto card doesn't work, or the gate doesn't work, or something doesn't work on the buses. What do the people do who have their card, put it in, It doesn't work. They either can't get onto the subway, for example, because the gate won't open. But more importantly, I know there's a fix to that. You just go talk to whoever might be there. But on the bus or the streetcar, right across the whole GTA, do people go to see the driver, let them know, wait for our enforcement officers to arrive and show them their Presto card? What do people actually do in those circumstances?
Yeah, it's a good question. Typically, it relates to the agency's policies in those circumstances. So to your point, once we get to what we target 100% availability of at least one device. In current cases, if one device is out, the driver will direct folks to the other device. That can be difficult in a crowded bus. Well, we work very closely with TTC and the other agencies in terms of how they want to manage that policy. But I think to your point is we want to get that down to 99.9 something so that we're really saying there's only a handful of devices across 5,000 that may not be working. And frankly, these are very sophisticated mobile devices. We're going to have some failures on a regular basis. This is just what happens in this zone, not unlike your smartphones or whatever. They have problems. So it really gets down to that very narrow segment and how the agencies want to deal with it.
So what do you know some agencies are doing now in those circumstances?
Well, I think they typically, if there's no reader available, they will ask, can you tap when you get to your next junction, you get on your next bus, you get to the next station. I know for TTC, those are the instructions they've given when we went through our difficult period is can you tap off at the station when you get there. So it is a bit of an honor system, to be honest, because eventually when Presto is fully deployed, there won't be legacy fare media to pay as an option. So we have to, first of all, make sure it is reliable, and secondly, how do you want to deal with the occasion where a reader might be out?
So people shouldn't be alarmed. They can be honest and tap somewhere else and pay the fare they ought to have paid.
Yeah,
they ought not to be alarmed when
the
that
vast
happens.
majority of riders are honest, and I've seen people actually do the tap when they hit another station or whatever. But again, I think our target is to get as close to 100% as we can, so that there are very few of these instances.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Any other questions to Rob? Howard? If you want to pass a question up to me, we don't take questions from the audience, but if you have something you want to give me, I'll read it out and ask a question. Go ahead, Howard.
Thank you. So, Rob, in terms of the upgrade, software upgrade, it's tended to support new products, but I assume it also corrects possible imperfections in previous
Can't hear you,
software.
A little louder. Howard, can you say that again? Louder?
So, is it only it says here to support new products, but does it also correct previous imperfections in existing software? I'm just curious.
Oh.
And if that is so, it may be a patch. And the question is, do we keep track of the patch, or do we depend on the vendor, or do we audit? How is it vetted?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I don't often speak about that, but every release does contain a number of break-fix issues that have happened in previous releases. It's a constant challenge as you put new software in, new things pop up, and there are dozens of fixes in every release that we keep track of this very closely with our suppliers, and we have a list, and we prioritize that list to make sure we're constantly changing. This is no different than Microsoft sends you out 2 or 3 times a year a new service release that actually upgrades the things that they found. So we're very disciplined around that. I don't know the exact number in this release, but every release does have dozens of minor fixes. If it's a major issue, we fix it at the time. If it's something that we can wait, it's a report that isn't accurate or whatever, we will line that up for the next major release so we can get the value of testing in a single release rather than testing 5 different times.
Okay. Thank you.
Robert, may I just ask, the whole issue of reloading and kind of explaining and communicating to the public how to reload and what the time parameters are, how are we doing that? What's the best way to communicate? And can you just explain it so I think people understand it's not like reloading this card, it is the way the Presto card is reloading at this moment, and things will change over time?
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's a paradigm shift when you move to Presto. How does this card work? What's on the card? How do I manage it properly? Working with Anita, as I've said, we're actually launching an information campaign on how to get a card, how to load a card. Now we have more places to load a card. We have their self-serve reload machines. We have Shoppers Drug Mart networks standing up. It's not just the web anymore. Of course, we always prefer that folks use auto load, so you can set it up and forget it. About 25% of our customers are using auto load. But I think with Anita's help, we want to make sure everybody understands the various ways that you use the card, you load the card. From my personal experience in Toronto, I've noticed that many riders don't understand that their transfer is on the card. I still see people getting paper transfers on buses and streetcars. So I have actually intervened sometimes and said, you know, your transfer is on the card. You don't have to. And now that all the stations on buses and streetcars are enabled, you don't need to carry that proof of payment piece of paper. So we have a lot to do to educate customers in this new region. So obviously in the 905 in Ottawa, it's been there for a while, they understand it. But not everybody in Toronto knows about Presto or how to use it. So we have to do a lot of work if we're going to get our adoption rates up higher this year by getting that message out and showing people how to do it.
And the 24 hours for...
Yeah, the 24-hour delay that we advertise is purely for the 905 buses because they're not connected during the day. But for TTC in Ottawa, the loads are pushed out to all the devices so that you can, in the morning, load your card. In the afternoon, you can tap on a TTC subway or bus and have that load updated. We do say that on the website, but it's hard to break the myth that it's 24 hours for everything.
So communication is really...
More communication, constantly will help.
I have Bonnie, then I have a question that's been passed to me, and then I've got a question of my own. So Bonnie?
So I really like the sales network piece that you're taking out, whether it's shoppers or other places. Probably from a very personal point of view, September during TIFF is when I get the most comments that face me about when is Toronto going to get with the program? And of course, that's such an international context. Hearing you speak about education and awareness, are we doing anything in particular as it relates both summer tourism and what goes on in Toronto, but then also in the fall when we get that massive, very condensed, intensive group of users of the system that come with an event such as TIFF?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've had it on our mind for some time that once we had the TTC enabled, we need to talk about tourists coming to Toronto or events coming to Toronto. And until recently, it wasn't practical to say, get a Presto card and you can travel everywhere. But now that we're there, it's an opportune time to actually look at events, look at tourists coming in on Up Express saying, get a Presto card when you arrive. I don't know about you folks, I go to other cities, I always look ahead of time and say, how do I get their travel card? We need to do that. One of the projects we have in place now is today you can only buy a card in Canada. It used to be Toronto region only, now it's Canada. We need to look at moving our card sales to the US and international so you can actually get a card and load it up before you get here. So these are on our mind of things that we can be starting to do to actually enlarge the audience for Presto.
Question passed to me, good question. I know you have the answer. Do you have any plan to introduce a Presto app for smartphones? I love the Presto card, but I have misplaced it on occasion, left it be home at whatever, but I always have my smartphone with me. When can I use my smartphone instead of my card?
The challenge today is that your Presto card is actually a computer. It's a very sophisticated computer, and it was designed at a time when there wasn't communications and that card interacted with the device. Where we're moving to open payment is we're moving the decision back to the central system. So when we move to open payment and you tap your credit card, the decision for payment is at the central system, not at the reader. When we have that in place, we can then move the Presto card to just a number, to a credential, and therefore a decision is made at the central system. Then, like you can today with your credit cards, put it on a mobile phone. You'll be able to put your Presto card on a mobile phone. But we need to make those steps to get there.
When will that be?
I would say that with open payment being the first on the list into early 2018, it would be sometime after that.
Without changing equipment.
Yeah, in fact, we simplify the equipment. All the equipment needs to do is read your card number. It doesn't have to make a fare decision in the future.
Changing fare gates.
Yes, but I would say it's going to be a couple or more years before we get to moving Presto over to that. Our thrust will be to get open payment stood up next year.
So it's on the horizon, but it's not on the close-in horizon. My question, Robert, there was a story today about the budget of Presto and how much you spent installing on TTC, suggesting it was over budget. My recollection is, and I just want you to say whether I got it right or wrong, that you came to the board to suggest a higher degree of quality assurance, a lower risk multi-stage rollout of TTC, which would have a budget cost of the order of magnitude of what is the, quote, over budget amount, and that we sought endorsement of that from the province and received the endorsement, and you went ahead with us. Have I got that about right, that you have stayed to the budget that we approved for you, which was a revision of the earlier budget?
Well, we're absolutely working within the revised budget amount that the board approved and the province approved, and we expect to finish the 5 phases of TTC rollout within that expanded budget amount for sure.
And the expansion of the budget was in order to accommodate the quality assurance you and your team believed was necessary?
Well, it was partly that. If we go back in time, the original estimate in 2011 of the 255 was predicated on what the team knew at that time. They'd been used to rolling out buses in the 905, but we didn't sign the TTC contract until literally the end of 2012. So when that contract was fully fleshed out, there was a lot more complexity, a lot more demand in that contract than was originally envisioned back in 2011. So necessarily we had to come back to the board to say, this is bigger than a bread box, or more things, more devices, more features. TTC has a lot of unique features around directional transfers, things that weren't in the basket from the 905. And on top of that, Chair, as you mentioned, we also had to stand up our better labs, better testing, better quality assurance. Those were the aggregate of things that drove the cost. And then also, some changes that happened in the TTC contract. We hadn't originally planned on new fare gates. We had planned on putting a reader on the original turnstiles. We hadn't planned on doing 230 old streetcars because Bombardier streetcars were late. So working with the TTC, we shifted the direction of the program, and inherent in that were some additional costs. But having come to the board and the province with the approval of that money, we are working within that budget to complete the program.
I just want to be clear, we approved your
Yes.
revised budget rather than you just ran through the budget.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions to Robert? Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.
Good job. Regional Express Rail, Jerry, where are you? Take it away.
Good job.
Well, you're putting Peter to work right away.
And as Jerry and Peter are coming to the table, I'd just like to thank Jerry Chaput for Jerry's Vice President of Rapid Transit, and Jerry stepped up and took on the role of Acting Chief Capital Officer while we were searching for a candidate for that position. And I'd just like to acknowledge Jerry and thank you very much for that extra effort that you put in and the excellent job that you did.
Thank you, well said.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the
Nice job.
opportunity.
And you're going to make the presentation and give Peter the hard questions?
Yes, that's the plan, and I have Leslie Wu as well as Vice
Lucky's up.
President of Planning and Policy to help with the high-speed rails aspect as well. So good morning, everybody. As John mentioned, I was acting as Chief Capital Officer, and that's why I'm here, because the report was prepared while Peter had not been in service yet. So we're very pleased to have Peter on board and looking forward to his contributions. This is an update on both the Rapid Transit and the Regional Express Rail programs, which form, of course, a big part of the largest transit infrastructure investment in Canadian history that we're making as an organization. We've made a good deal of progress since the last quarter when we provided our last report to the board. Earlier this week, I was at our first municipal network session, which was attended by over 70 representatives from municipalities, MTO, IO, and Metrolinx staff. And we hope to hold these sessions 3 to 4 times a year with our municipal partners. We really see this as being critical to our collaborative effort that will allow us to achieve our shared program goals. On LRT, we're progressing through important milestones, thanks in part again to our ongoing collaborative relationships with our municipal partners. Alstom was engaged on May 12, 2017, and will provide vehicles on a variety of LRT projects. This is an important plan to be able to ensure that we have vehicles delivered on time for our Eglinton and Finch West projects, as well as here in Ontario. Finally, early works on RER have started, and we're making good progress on the EA and procurement work for several of these projects. RER involves many large, complex, and interdependent projects, and staff have been moving the program forward quite well. So some highlights on the Eglinton Crosstown. Dawn and Humber, our 2 tunnel boring machines that were aptly named, were extracted just east of Yonge Street. The cutter head is shown here in this picture, and it's really only a sliver of the entire assembly. Construction on the Crosstown or Eglinton line continues, and characterization of the work is much like an iceberg. There's a tremendous amount of work taking place below ground, while we only see very little work at the surface. However, it is still very visible work that is ongoing. Crosslinx is the consortium delivering the Crosstown, continues to work towards its September 2021 in-service date. Metrolinx is working diligently with its partners at the City of Toronto, with the Toronto Hydro, to ensure that progress moves as efficiently as possible, and we continue our communications with city councillors and residents as the work progresses. On Finch, the procurement is restarting and expected to close in late 17, early 18. On Hurontario, we're scheduled to release the RFP and later this summer. And Hamilton's report, environmental project report, is expected to receive approval in August of 2017, which will allow us to continue our progress on that project. For our rapid transit program, we continue to work with our partners at York Region Rapid Transit Corporation on several projects in their region. On the Barrie Corridor, we've started a lot of work, completion of various works, including construction of the Maple Station pedestrian tunnels was completed in May of 2017. A public design workshop for the Davenport Diamond project was held on April 5th, 2017, and this was the third such Community Advisory Committee meeting on that project. The Davenport Diamond, of course, is a grade separation project to eliminate one of the busiest train intersections in North America, where CP freight intersects with our GO Transit lines. And so we're changing that into a much higher level grade separated crossing. The official grand opening of the Guelph Station took place in March 2017 on the Kitchener Corridor, with the ribbon cutting ceremony in April of 2017. And on the Stouffville and Richmond Hill corridors, the minister announced all-day 15-minute service on Stouffville, and the design and construction of the Agincourt, Milliken, and Unionville stations, and a grade separation at Steeles Avenue has been combined for procurement as an AFP project that will close the RFP will close this spring, with financial close expected in the fall. On the Lakeshore East corridor, the early stages of the EA process are underway for corridor expansion between Union Station and Scarborough Junction. RFQs for the central and east sections of the corridor as a build finance contract were issued this spring. On the Lakeshore West corridor, GO Transit began recently using the new Lewis Road layover facility, which enables us to park and store trains overnight and improve or create a more efficient service for Hamilton for early morning service. A public meeting for the Burl Oak Drive grade separation environmental assessment was also held in Oakville on March 30th to introduce the project to the public. On the Milton corridor, the RFP for the Cooksville GO Station, parking structure and new station building was released in January of 2017. Amongst other things, includes 1,900 new parking spaces and a new station. The RFP for the new bus terminal at Kipling Station was also released in April of 2017. To achieve the regional express rail service on the Kitchener corridor, Metrolinx continues to work with the CN through an agreement in principle and on the development of the CN Freight Bypass project. The CN Freight Bypass is necessary as a diversion of freight traffic off the Kitchener corridor to again enable us to allow two-way all-day service on a corridor that currently shares traffic with CN. Metrolinx continues to work towards this initiative, bringing this initiative to a reality. In Niagara, I had the pleasure of visiting the Niagara Regional Council recently to talk about the expansion of service to Grimsby at Casablanca Road by 2021 and to Niagara Falls by 2023. The environmental assessment for this project was approved back in 2011, but does require an addendum to support the new expansion. Similar to Niagara, an EA was approved in 2011 for the Bowmanville expansion. CP Rail has identified new infrastructure requirements on their corridor, again triggering the need for an addendum to the 2011 environmental assessment. The request to qualify and quote for a technical advisor that will assist with this EA addendum was issued in May of this year. On network infrastructure, construction of the new control center in Oakville is progressing well to a 2018 targeted completion. It will be a LEED certified building and will provide us a home for a single point of organizational control and authority. The design of the Union Station Rail Corridor Signaling System program is also progressing, and the entire project, which includes the resignaling of the Cherry, Scott, and John Street control areas, the final approaches into Union Station, are scheduled to be completed in 2020. On electrification, the Transit Project Assessment process announcement was released in June 2017. You may have seen this in the newspaper or on our website. Public meetings have already started and will be held across the GTHA this week. There's one actually in Ajax this evening and another in Metro Hall in Toronto on Thursday. After the TPAP announcement, the government also announced a feasibility study of hydrogen fuel cells as an alternative to the traditional electrification. A lot has changed since we last examined fuel cells back in 2010, and now we're taking a prudent approach to study whether the technology would be viable. We continue to take steps, although, to electrify the system on most of our rail corridors and to continue to meet our 2025 commitment for electrification.
It's not a question of electrification. It's a question of electrification by what technology?
By what technology?
Whether it's from the catenary or whether it's from fuel cell.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes, that's
There's no backing away from our commitment to electrification.
That's correct.
Thanks.
I'm now passing it over to Leslie, who can take the Ontario high-speed rail.
So just very briefly, just to give.
Why don't we see if there are any questions to Jerry first, and then we'll come to your piece, just so we don't lose the thread with Jerry. Brian?
I just had one question, Jerry. You mentioned a meeting tomorrow at Metro Hall, just across from here, at John and King. I actually live in that neighborhood, and I received a notice, but it was for the environmental assessment process. Will it also talk about hydrogen there as well?
No, the session will be focused on the electrification using the catenary system. There will be people there that could probably provide the same general information on the hydrogen, in that we are looking at it as in parallel to the electrification to see whether it's a viable technology.
Great. So, meeting worth going to, probably.
Yes, very much so.
Any other questions, Jerry, on all the things he reported on? Janet?
And part of the work that we're doing on the electrification, we're looking at the what I call it, the sustainability of the electrical system, in terms of how that would impact on the GO trains. Because if there's, major power shortage, outages or something like that, which we have experienced from time to time in Ontario.
Yes.
What's the thinking about how we manage that kind of thing, or is that being built into the planning?
So there would be traction power substations associated with the electrification that would provide, and battery backups that would provide us to provide service for a short period of time in the power outage, if there was a power outage. The size and the locations and the length of time that those would be able to operate trains or electrified service would still have to be determined. But the intent is that it would provide some sort of emergency power that would allow you to remove tracks or move trains to the next station to allow people to disembark.
Okay, because I do remember for the city and the region's emergency business continuity planning, emergency planning, in 2003, the GO system was the only thing that was still working, in terms of getting people out of the city. So I think, that thinking, I think, is really important as we go forward on this.
We also have that planned as well for the Eglinton Crosstown as well, so it would be enough to power the trains so that they could be out of the tunnels and move forward to provide service during a power outage.
Peter, you're okay with delivering all this stuff?
Yes,
It's a fairly extensive list. You're on it?
absolutely. We're on it.
In the bag?
It's in the bag when it's in the bag.
Is it done yet?
And it's hard work, and we're asking people to work with us, and we'll get there together.
Very good. Leslie?
Sorry, I asked a question.
Sorry, we don't take questions from the audience. When people have things, they pass them up to me, and I try to edit which ones we'll discuss and which ones we won't. The one you passed me is dealing with commercial terms of a contract that I won't address in a public session because we don't deal with contracts here. So I'm happy to discuss it. I'm happy to discuss it with you offline, but
It's a $500,000 penalty per day for one of the board members might ask if that was in the star.
rest assured, when we discuss contracts in closed session, we of course address matters like that. We don't address commercial matters in public sector. But I don't want to have a debate with you here. I'm happy to meet with you after the meeting. Very happy to. Leslie.
Thank you. I just want to add a small footnote about a piece that is being led by the Ministry of Transportation. This is the high-speed rail announcement that the government announced in May of this year, which is to initiate an environmental assessment. While this is being led by the Ministry of Transportation, and we are, as we always are, a good partner with the ministry, part of this corridor will intersect with the portion of the RER on the Kitchener corridor. So this is mostly to give the board notice that we are working very closely with the Ministry of Transportation to make sure that as they progress their work, it very much interlocks and takes into full consideration our timelines and deadlines for the RER program. And that's my footnote.
But this is not our project, right?
No.
Just to be.
It's being led by the Ministry of Transportation.
As it's conceived, like one of our objectives, from what we've heard in previous reports, is to speed up the trains from Kitchener to Toronto, because that is our service corridor, and that's what we're trying to do. And to make it a really viable and effective service, we want to be two-way all day and considerably faster than it is now. That's why we have to do the rail bypass. That's why we have to improve the tracks, da-da-da-da-da. As we do that, is there a possibility there's going to be a high-speed rail next door that'll be much faster than what we're trying to grow for RER? Or will our RER realization be as fast as any way of getting from Kitchener to Toronto, subject to express versus local service?
So I think, Rob, those are the questions of the work we're about to progress with MTO will begin to address. We're not there yet. The terms of reference for the study are just being, the environmental assessment are just being studied. Keep in mind that the high-speed rail, the frequency of stops is far more intermittent than ours. So the interface is not at every stop or every station, but we do have to look at it very carefully because there are a number of things that need to be worked on. In particular, for example, you can imagine that at Union Station, how this all converges is a question, and whether and how we're going to future-proof to integrate that well is the work we still have to do. So we're not, I don't have an answer.
Does the Colinet report contemplate a separate corridor through, let's say, Brampton? Mm-hmm. Or is it the existing corridor, which is space constrained as to the width of the corridor? And
it's the existing corridor.
Give me some more feel.
It is they're using the existing corridors now we have to work through how we generate that capacity with a high-speed rail in the same corridors.
But is there a reason why the RER trains wouldn't go just as fast as the high-speed train?
It is quite possible they'll be going in certain parts, especially the more dense areas where there are more frequent stops, they could possibly be going roughly the same speed. Which speed it is, we're not quite sure yet. But we know what our ambition is, so it's we still have to work it out. It's not, we haven't done the technical work to really answer your question well.
Thank you.
Can I just piggyback on your question, Rob? And that is, am I understanding it that there might only be room for one set of tracks that both types of trains would have to use?
I don't know the answer to that question, Brian. That's part of the exercise we're trying to explore. We know what we have set in place for RER that Jerry and Peter are embarking on. This is a new element that was not contemplated when we initiated, so we have to work it through.
But we do know, for example, coming through Brampton is relatively constrained physically.
It's constrained.
Taking down buildings.
Yeah, even with RER, it's constrained. Right. So it's yes. These are the problems we're going to have to figure out.
Carl, then Howard.
Given the likely frequency of HSR versus RER, I want to have some kind of assurance, and this may be an unfair question at this point in time, that the development of HSR through the environmental assessments and the implementation process will not impede the speed with which we complete RER. And that's still a number of years away until completion. So I guess I want to have basically some assurance from our own staff here at Metrolinx that this is not going to stand in the way of completing RER on our timeline.
I would say that that's our going-in premise. We'll be reporting very frequently to the board as needs be if that changes.
I would anticipate that the greater number of passengers will still be on RER because, as you just pointed out, there won't be as many stops, people on that line.
Yes.
I have Howard, then Bonnie, then Marianne.
Just my assumption is that the HSR will need a dedicated track, simply to get up to speed, and as compared to the RER. I just want to make that comment. I'm sure your study will confirm or deny that fact, but that's my assumption.
Thank you.
And I'm just trying to square the circle of how can there be a dedicated track, given our commitment to RER, physically constrained, that I don't see how there can, at 100,000 feet, I don't see how there can be a dedicated track. The closer we get into Toronto, the less opportunity there is for it, I assume.
So what part of the work will be we'll be trying to monitor or analyze the interface of the two service plans and how they work, to see how we can optimize what we already have and what's possible and whether or not it leads to Howard's conclusion or not.
That's helpful. That's helpful. Yeah. Bonnie, then Marianne.
Rob, this is more a question for you from a governance point of view. I only know what I know related to the high-speed rail announcement from papers, newscasts, etc. From a governance point of view, what is the MTO Metrolinx connection when something as substantive as this emerges? And what would you have been involved as chair? Would you have been brought into that conversation at an earlier stage? Was the report as much a surprise to you as it was to the rest of us? Are we missing some kind of governance loop with MTO on something as substantive as this?
I don't think so. It goes way beyond the service mandate of Metrolinx. It goes to Kitchener and then potentially to Windsor. So it's clearly not within our statutory mandate or even our current service area. And this is an MTO-driven project with proper ministerial guidance over it, and so MTO is leading it. But at every stage, MTO is consulted with our staff for background, for facts. Mr. Collinette consulted with us, the team at MTO where they're leading it. We're trying to be extremely helpful partners and provide everything we can as we evolve the RER mandate and sort out the service plan for that and the corridor requirements and the like. Similarly, MTO is driving the high-speed rail project, and we all work for the same people, taxpayers of Ontario, so we're cooperating every way we can. Just being clear that we don't have the lead on this. We have the lead and full responsibility on RER. They have the lead and full responsibility on high-speed rail. They can't do their work without cooperation from us. We certainly can't do our work without cooperation from them. And that cooperation at the staff level, I think, is excellent. And I'm just trying to get clarity through these questions to Leslie. But I'm not concerned about it at a governance level. There's never been a suggestion this was our responsibility, and we have properly deferred to the ministry's leadership.
But I guess the reason I was asking, though, is coming at it from the point of view of RER is also beyond our GTHA mandate. And that the province has moved within the Metrolinx responsibility to deliver RER. So now I'm thinking about, you're right, this is, and I don't object to what you said.
We're not going to Windsor.
So that was really where I was coming from. Is that a conversation that at some point has got to become alive? Whether it's through the review of the Act of Metrolinx or something else.
I guess it might at some point. Right now, we have our statutory responsibility, and we have our service plan, which goes beyond our statutory responsibility because it goes to Niagara.
Right.
It goes out to Kitchener. It goes up to Barrie. So it goes beyond our statutory mandate, but it's by explicit assignment of responsibility beyond our statutory area. There's been no discussion, certainly with me, and I don't think with John ever, of the notion of taking us beyond Kitchener to London and Windsor and the like, any more than to Ottawa or to Montreal or whatever. So I don't think that's it's not in play in any conversation I've been party to.
It just, you're left when maybe it's because it's so early in having received the report, but I'm really actually very pleased that Leslie's tied into some of these conversations, because it feels like, to excuse the analogy, it feels like the tracks are somehow being developed in a parallel way, and I don't know whether they're the same track or different ones, and that just sounds bloody confusing, if I could be so bold to say that.
Leslie, why don't you report back in 6 months as to how it's going?
Happy to.
Okay, because there's obviously a lot of interest,
Yes.
not limited in my own, and why don't you just let us know, and you might even invite the ministry to come and make a presentation.
Definitely will.
I know we have a senior ministry official present. I'm not going to ask for the presentation on the fly, Vinay, but maybe at a future date, you'd be very welcome to come and let. Great. Yeah. Thanks very much, Vinay. Okay, any more questions? I see no more. That brings us to the relief line and Young Subway extension. We asked for an update on this because there's been considerable activity at City Hall and in York Region, and Leslie and I have been meeting with the relevant mayors, chairs, and others on these projects, and I wanted to have an update from Leslie on this. Leslie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And just before I get going, I quickly want to introduce two members of the Metrolinx team, our new Vice President of Project Planning and Program Development, Ansar Ahmed, and our new Director of Rapid Transit, Heather McDonald. So
Welcome
these
to both of you.
two folks are... We're in good hands.
Good.
My report is very brief, and really it's to let you know that we are progressing well on these two connected projects, two subway extensions. Both the Relief Line and the Young Subway North were identified in the Big Move as priority projects. The government has, and they're seen as a critical part of the regional system. There's a little bit of information here on the projects themselves. The Relief Line, the Young Subway North is a 7.4 kilometer extension, and the Relief Line, as some of you may know, extends through the downtown east-west, and then we are also looking at the opportunities to extend it further north. The discussions between York Region, the City of Toronto, TTC, and ourselves has been a very productive one. We have set up an executive program where the senior leaders of the organizations meet regularly. We are at the point now where both the City of Toronto and York Region have, through their various councils, identified support for advancing both projects. You should know that $55 million was attributed by the provincial government to continue the planning, design, and engineering of the Young Subway North extension, and $155 million was given to us to advance the work of the Relief Line. So further to that, however, to sort of reinforce the extent of the depth of our partnership, York Region has secured additional public transit infrastructure funding from the federal government in the order of $36.3 million to support this work. And the City of Toronto has also secured an additional $55.52 million for the Relief Line project, also from the PTIF program. Just last month, the City of Toronto endorsed the ability of the staff, TTC and the city, to work towards the Young Subway extension, and gave the authority to engage in a memorandum of understanding with ourselves. There were, both York and the city have agreed in terms of the definition of roles and responsibilities, in which case ensuring that the TTC lead the project management at this stage of the work, given that in the case of the Young Subway North, it is an extension of the existing Young Corridor, and they ultimately will own and operate it. In the case of the Relief Line, the City of Toronto and TTC are negotiating another memorandum of understanding with ourselves, and work is under Ansar and Heather's leadership is proceeding very well and cooperatively with them on that point. Last week, the York Region Committee of the Whole approved their staff recommendations that parallel the City of Toronto's recommendations. And tomorrow, that staff report and recommendations of the Committee of the Whole will be at the York Region Council. We expect that the York Region Council will also adopt the staff recommendations, aligning with the City of Toronto's recommendations and aligning with what all the parties have been agreeing to. Just finally, in terms of, let me just go forward one more, our next steps. The work is proceeding in three parallel streams of work. One is the actual technical analysis and the terms of reference of the work that has to be done both on the Yonge Subway Extension and the relief line. The second is what I would call the administrative arrangements for the flow of funds through ourselves and in both directions in some cases. For example, the York money flowing through us to the TTC who are leading the project management and project development work. And then the third is really landing firm on the governance arrangement, which are a set of principles that all four parties have agreed to. And so this is more a point to the board that these two projects are progressing well, well coordinated, and to thank both York and the TTC and the City of Toronto for the great work that we continue and the good relationship we continue to have with these challenging projects.
Thank you very much for the update. In terms of funding, these are both in our next wave category, is that correct?
Correct. So they're in the pipeline of work. They're not fully funded, but we have now the work to put them in a high state of readiness should the funding become available.
Got it. And we have the funding for this planning work on both of them.
Yes.
It's been provided.
Correct.
And the federal government has also provided planning funding to support this as well.
Which is new for PTIF.
Right.
Yeah.
And on the recovery of costs by the TTC, do they pay nothing towards the Yonge North extension? Is that 100 cents on the dollar cost recovery?
So the way it works, there's a lot of money that flows back and forth between ourselves and the TTC in terms of service and time we spend on different projects. We'll have a similar arrangement since the TTC will be spending time on some of the technical work, and the money is flowing to them to cover those costs. So we'll cover their costs. York Region will be spending time on the project. And so there will be a calibration and administration of everybody's time towards this pot of money for the project.
As a matter of geography, is every inch of this project outside the City of Toronto?
No.
No. So why is it why do York, as I read the resolution, it says there's a cost sharing.
Yes.
On the relief line.
Yes.
Between Toronto and ourselves.
Yes.
But on the Yonge North, it is only ourselves and York Region that contribute to the cost, and Toronto doesn't contribute to the cost.
Currently, that's the situation, yes.
I'm just asking why the difference?
Why the difference? I think the City of Toronto has been later to the project, and so this was a landmark event to City Council for the city to turn its focus to the project, allow the staff to begin to work with us more closely. So that was part of the discussion and negotiations, and that's where we landed.
Got it. You're smiling but not commenting.
That's right. At this point.
Marianne?
Leslie, may I ask, just on the diagram that came up earlier, and just trying to remember, because we've looked at these diagrams before, is this conceptually the same alignment that we were talking about earlier?
Correct.
More or less.
You're talking about the the relief line alignment. Yeah, and it's very general.
It's very general, but it is the same shape, right? Yeah, okay.
Any other questions on this update? This was intended just as an update, so people would realize how much progress has been made to move these forward. Sorry, you're saying?
It's about time for the Yonge subway.
Well, thank you for your comment.
Yes for an answer.
I think the point here is both projects are moving ahead now with good funding of the planning work, and we're making good progress, and we have the political cooperation now of both York Region and the City of Toronto, and Leslie and I had very constructive meetings with both the city and with York Region leadership, it's very, I agree with you, it's a very positive development on both projects. Thank you, Leslie. And next is Robert Siddle. Proposed fare changes, Robert?
Yeah, and Anita and Leslie is going to say the people. Anita is joining us. I'll be succinct, hopefully, as usual. Again, the note, I think, provides the background for the fare increase, and it's to deal with our costs that are... Oh, sorry. I just went right in because the chair said for me to go first.
Okay, sorry.
Someone else meant to speak?
Yeah, we are supposed to present the service expansion that leads into the fare changes, but we're at your pleasure, Chair. There's a whole presentation on the additional services that have been accumulating over the last 2 years. But we are...
Is it anything different than what we read?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Then you better,
So,
if it's different from what we read, you better say it.
Yeah, the explanation of why we're increasing the fares comes from the work that Leslie is putting forward in terms of the service expansion, so I would recommend she goes first.
Okay, give us a rapid fire version.
Yeah, I'm actually,
only because I know we're running behind a bit.
And in that regard, then I'll probably stick to this slide. This is really a sum up, because the rest of the presentation goes corridor by corridor about in detail about the amount of service that we've been adding in every corridor since 2015. Just to let you know that there have been over 240 new trips added each week. It's an increase of 18% since 2015. It comes up to a total of 2 million new riders in the system since 2015. Half of those, so the 1 million of those new riders, are attributed to the new bus and rail service that we've introduced between 2015 and 2017. And the other half is actually growth that we've been gathering on the Lakeshore East and West, which is the continuation of the off-peak service that we introduced in 2013. There is, on the Kitchener line, hourly midday weekday service that is new. Two-way all-day weekend service to the Barrie line. Just this week, we added on the Stouffville line hourly, midday, and evening weekday service. And of course, we have extended our Lakeshore and Richmond Hill lines into two new stations, one in Gormley on the Richmond Hill line. Not lest we forget, we have a very effective bus network and bus system, and we have recalibrated our bus system as the new rail services come in, and that has also included service extensions to Brantford, Cambridge, Kitchener throughout the network. In the matter of saving time, I'm not going to go through the corridor by corridor, Chair, but it was most importantly to emphasize that.
Give us the headlines. Just
okay.
Flick through the headlines.
If you like. So Lakeshore East and West, we added the new Harbour Station in Hamilton in 2015 in time for the Pan Am Games. There were 2 weekday evening trips, so closing that 60-minute gap in portions of 60 minutes. Where we were only 60 minutes, we did the whole corridor into a 30-minute service. And I talked about bus service to Brantford with McMaster University and Aldershot also in September of last year. On the Milton corridor, we should note one of our more constrained corridors because of we don't own this corridor. We've been able to add 4 new peak rail trips, bringing that to a total of 20 trips every day, and we were able to add bus service to connect Cambridge and Milton. So that's an additional 12 trips every day. On the Kitchener corridor, that's where we've seen some significant additions in the last 2 years. We've now got about 2,100 boardings per day through the 14 new trips that we added in the fall of 2015. And extending peak trips from Georgetown to 4 peak trips from Georgetown to Kitchener last fall. The frequent 2-way all-day GO bus service, which is not many people don't hear about it, but it's been incredibly effective, running from Kitchener to Bramalea GO station, and that's been a significant increase as well. The Barrie corridor has been one of our most active insofar as in December, we built on the success of our summer weekend Barrie service and introduced year-round weekend service on that line between Aurora and Union. And once we've completed the passing infrastructure, that service on Barrie, we anticipate, is going to move from every 75 minutes to hourly, which will be a great improvement in terms of frequency. And we hope to introduce more weekday, midday, and evening service in the near future. In Richmond Hill, this is a corridor that we added a new GO rail station. I mentioned Gormley, but we will be also adding a further new station, Bloomington, with hoping for an opening in 2019. And additional peak and shoulder peak train service was added in June of 2016. Stouffville, I mentioned, is our most recent addition of expansion, which started this Monday. But prior to that, we had added new weekday peak trips from Lincolnville to Union in December of last year. The new trips started on Monday are hourly 2-day, and there's 17 new trips to Unionville, between Unionville and Union, and 2 out to Lincolnville, and 2 further extensions of Unionville to Lincolnville. And finally, on the bus side, there's been quite a number of expansions that really align with the changes to our rail service, and many of them connected to the 400 series corridors. We've added improvements to the park and ride and carpool facilities in order, in particular, in the Mississauga Transitway, and our new Square One terminal facility. And that is what we've done in the last 2 years.
Thank you very much. Now, Robert?
Yeah, and that leads in, so Leslie is given one of the main reasons why our cost structures are going up. The other two is we do have increases in our operating costs on some of our cost drivers. And the other new one is that we have infrastructure that's coming into service that we have repairs and maintenance on. So those are the reasons for why our costs are going up. The other thing, Chair, I would like to do is just to put it in context of our overall plan. So for this particular year, this fare increase will generate approximately $8.2 million over the fiscal year. For the same period, our operating subsidy from the province of Ontario is going up by $103 million, or over 36%. So again, I think what we try to do is to try and put forward a balanced plan that takes into consideration the various opportunities we have for funding this corporation, and while we don't like to ever put forward fare increases, I think it's justified given the support we've been given by the province of Ontario.
Thank you. And just to explain on service expansion, typically when we add a new service, the cost recovery on it will be lower, at least in the early going, than the average of our system. Is that fair? Which is why it requires additional
Yes, that's fair.
subsidy or fare revenue to,
Yeah.
to offset that.
Yeah, I mean, operationally, Greg would say that we try to create bus service first, and grow the growth in the service through our bus services to train meets first, and then as we increase the train service, we are able to cut back on the bus service, but we do that to deal with the fact that it takes a while to grow up the ridership as we bring in new service.
And it's a 3% increase with the exception of fares below $5.65.
Yep.
And just remind everybody why you continue to freeze the $5.65 and below fares, which is making shorter fares in relative terms marginally less expensive than they were previously compared to the longer distance.
Right, and I think that's, Leslie can comment on it too, but I think that still aligns us with where we see our fare integration going, that the fares for those shorter trips are consistent with the TTC fares, are closer to those TTC fares. So again, I think that's the reason why we're recommending. We're still recommending that for farther distance, there's additional costs. So we're putting forward a 3% for those longer distances, but for the shorter distances, we're freezing the fares still at the rates that they are last year.
Leslie, do you want to comment?
The only thing I would comment is, as our research has shown, shorter trips are the larger volume of trips in the whole region. And so therefore, we want to ensure that our GO shorter trips are competitive with other shorter trip fares. And that's the reason for holding down the short trip versus the much longer trips.
The short trips, even with this change, remain more expensive
Yes.
per kilometer than long trips. Is that right?
Yeah.
But the gap is narrowing.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes. So we didn't want to keep moving it further and further apart from where we want to make it more. It's about a competitiveness in order to encourage people to use public transit as a viable option. It gives them more options.
Carl, and then Rahul.
Very quickly, part of the answer perhaps to what my question is has been answered rather. One of the submissions we received here spoke specifically to the difference of the 565 as the cutoff, and the fact that much of the additional improvements are also helping those who are paying 565 and less, more frequent service, as an example. The second point that is being made is that the additional costs, the natural inflationary things, apply to everybody equally. So is there anything more that you can add to your rationale for having that as a cutoff than what you've already stated, I guess, is the question. Because it raises a good point.
Maybe, go ahead, Chris.
Outside of the heading towards fare integration and all that sort of thing.
I'm going to ask Chris to take that one.
For a number of years, the changes in the GO fares took a different approach. They were actually flatter across the whole system. So for a number of years, the short distance fares were actually going up by a significantly higher percentage than the longer distance fares. So by doing it this way, we're just trying to rebalance things a little bit and meet the objectives that Leslie set out.
Keep going, Carl, if you want more.
I understand that. Intuitively, one would think that there's going to be some further potential catch-up, but I understand that may come out in the fare integration, and that's, of course, where the rubber will hit the road.
There's actually a lot of ridership potential in the shorter trips, because the shorter trips aren't just, say, City of Toronto trips, they're shorter trips anywhere on the system.
Yes, I understand that.
So there's actually a lot of ridership potential, as Leslie mentioned, that's not being met because the fare is a barrier. People just won't even think of it as an option. So this is just helping to try and manage that issue while we work on the longer-term fare integration solution.
Getting into the very bottom parts of York region on the trains are relatively short trips, aren't they?
Yes.
Again, these would be ones that are affected.
Depending on where you're starting.
Right, depending on your starting point. Rahul?
This might be a slightly unpopular question, but aimed at Rob here. If you follow along, so CPI in Toronto is about 1.9%.
Yeah.
The fare increase is at 3%. When we've been in a similar circumstance of several years here where we've had rapid growth and we needed to increase fares, the provincial subsidies also gone up in those years too, but the fare increase has typically been 5%. Why 3% this year?
Again, I would say hopefully good negotiations with the province in terms of getting the uptick in the operating subsidy is part of the reason why we're able to hold them at 3%. I think that's the main reason, to be honest with you.
I think folks would appreciate that.
Kathy?
Yeah, just back on the earlier comment about the short fares and the long fares, what percentage of the ridership is classified as short versus long?
On the GO system or region-wide?
threshold?
And I'm hoping Martin.
Well, I mean, in terms of the rate increase, the 565 and under?
It's actually quite small, partly because the fares are so high for.
Are we talking 5% or less would be in the frozen area?
This is an educated guess. I'm sorry, I don't have the number.
Okay.
My guess is it would be below 10% for sure, that the vast majority of our trips are for longer distances.
Okay.
But you believe the growth opportunity, if we can get the fare in the right place.
Definitely growth opportunities.
Frequency of service and fare should lead to significant increases in volume.
Yes, and this is also with an eye to the future as RER comes online. When we have 15-minute service, our service will be used for other purposes than currently. It won't just be for commuter purposes, it'll be for connected trips on the system and shorter distances.
If I could add, Chair, we've based this on actual evidence. Where we added more service, for example, Danforth GO Station, where we added more service by the Stouffville train stopping more frequently and the more frequent service, we've seen a rise in those, and that's a one-stop trip. And the volumes have increased, so we know there's a latent ridership for those short trips.
Billy?
I'm going to move the recommendation. I think it's completely justified. I was going to talk more about the 565 and less. I understand the competitive reasons why you wouldn't want to do that as a business, and I'm going to move the recommendation this time. It's perfectly appropriate to maintain your costs and have people who are using the services pay for some portion of those costs.
Do you have a seconder?
I don't know.
Brian seconded. Does anybody wish to discuss the matter further? I see none. All in favor? Any opposed? That's passed. Thank you very much. Good job. That brings us to, we're skipping item 14 and 15, although we welcome comments in writing, submissions on items 14 and 15, and we'll bring it back to the agenda in mid-September. The next item is the Auditor General update on the work we're doing to respond to each of the Auditor General's recommendations in her most recent report. Robert?
Yes, and again, I think the starting point to this
Maybe
report,
I should just say, this is on every agenda. We stated we would do this every quarter until you were done. So,
yeah. What is different this particular quarter is that Peggy Gilmore and her team, who is the director of our internal audit department, have done a full audit of management's representations. So what you see in front of you in terms of the of where we are in terms of the implementation is been tested by our internal audit department to make sure it's true and correct. The other thing I'll draw the public's attention to is obviously the red dot. Again, I think we have and continuously improved our vendor performance management system. What the red dot refers to is the fact that we are actually bringing in a system that does this as a formality, and to put the information into that system to be able to do the mathematical calculations that will come out of that system to help us support our judgment is taking longer than anticipated. But we have made the commitment to get that work done, and that's reflected in the report.
thank you very much. This was reviewed at the Audit Committee yesterday in detail. Chairman, are you okay with this?
Yes, we're on track, subject to that one delay on one project, but it'll be caught up.
Excellent. Are we okay with that? Just for information, but we said we would do this every quarter until we're done. So we'll keep hearing from you, Robert, and please thank Peggy for the work, but tell them to stay on it hard. That brings us to the Customer Experience Committee Chair report, Marianne McKenna. Dr. Marianne McKenna.
Dr. McKenna's fine. Joined the physicians in my family. Fine.
Exactly. You got a lot of doctors in that family.
Doctors hanging around. So I'll edit a bit just because a lot of these items have been covered in other reports, but the Customer Experience Advisory Committee, which Carl Zaire chairs, I think is a very important opportunity for dialogue between customers and the board, really. Issues that came up are really improving communications, which I think as the system is changing, we need to, people say they don't understand how to use the system, but I think some of the devices that are coming on board really do help people understand when your train's going to be 5 minutes late. You can take your foot off the gas pedal trying to make it to the train. And trying to remove the perceived barriers to taking transit and encourage people to choose GO, such as campaign highlighting the convenience of GO versus car. So I think with our new VP of Marketing, our new Chief Marketing Officer, that will assist. You've heard that bus services have been expanded and improved, and I think a discussion of safety is the next issue, which comes up on the next slide. But I think, we're talking about safety being an issue for everyone, for the passengers that are rushing to get on or off trains and make some foolish moves, trying to cross tracks and the like. I think we have to take it as a responsibility that it's not only for Metrolinx to increase the number of ambassadors and to think very seriously about how to expand the platform, say, at Union Station, which is an ongoing initiative that you'll hear more about in the next months. I think on the safety update, I'm messing up my slide person. There have been a number of initiatives. I think safety is absolutely a priority of the Customer Experience Committee. There have been a number of initiatives, again, looking at safety related to Rail Safety Week. So what you see on the right is the image on the right is a simulation, trying to understand what the responses will be during certain events that have happened in the past. So these were used as communications devices and presentations to schools. Next slide. On the operations update, a number of interesting and important things happening. The groundbreaking for the new Union Station bus terminal, which is happening as part of a very large build project down at the, you can see it bridging over the rail lines, large development project that is a mixed use and accommodates the bus station at the base. And Metrolinx is very involved in the design development of that to make sure that choreography and flow of people moving through that station, connecting through the path back to Union Station, being able to use the Presto machines. All of this is a focus of Metrolinx involvement as a principal tenet of that project. You've heard about GO celebrating its 50th anniversary, which I think is not only an opportunity to look back, but very much to look forward. And I think that's, that balance is happening within the committee's discussions. The next slide takes us to operations, and I think these the new machines that have been introduced, a pilot project to test the capabilities on the ticket vending machines. I think these are an opportunity for people to not only use the machines but comment on the graphics, which I found from a design perspective very distracting and hard to know where to start with your card. So our committee also comments on issues like this. But I think what you see on here is also the using media, Twitter, Go Transit Bus, and the new website that will be coming from gotransit.com website in late 2017. And I think I think Metrolinx is experimenting with all of these and trying to bring communications on board to the many ways in which you get information. It's no longer a single stream. So I think there's a balancing that's going on as we test our ability to communicate with the variety of customers. The Presto update you've heard from Rob. Again, I think it is about improving communications. That's a major issue. Just understanding that these are new initiatives. These are really exciting, bringing us to be a global region with something like Presto. And so there is a break-in period, and it is a shared responsibility with TTC and the larger region as we go forward. So I think it's a really ambitious program and very well managed. And our expectations are high that within the next number of years that all that will be smoothed through. And then the last slide is design excellence. Just to remind, this is a big initiative of this committee, but it really relates to basic questions that we ask. How does it work? Does it work well? And then how does it look and feel? So the how does it work part of it is to say, is the system legible, architectural word, but are we giving customers the opportunity to seamlessly move through the system, not only moving their bodies, but fare integration and permeating the available transit network? Is it safe? Accessibility is a very big issue, I think, as the legislation supports and the demographics of our region and our country support the idea of a more universal accessibility, and so that's a very big push. And among other things, the environmental issues. Is it a sustainable proposition? How do we look on environmental issues, maximizing daylight in our train stations and looking for energy saving strategies in terms of powering the trains as they go through communities. And also art has been something that's included in 14 of the capital construction projects as an element of delight, but I think that it's part and parcel of the very broad mandate that this customer experience committee deals with on a day-to-day, quarterly basis. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Carl, do you want to add anything from your perspective of the advisory committee?
I think the report speaks for itself. I just wanted to emphasize the safety and the communications. Those are two things that the users are continually talking about at that advisory committee level.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne, for your leadership of the committee, and congratulations again on your honor. Are there any questions to Marianne? I see none. The next item number 18, requires a resolution that Rahul has offered to move Charles offered a second, that we settle on Renforth as the station name, not Renforth Gateway, not Commerce, but simply Renforth for the reasons offered in the report. I assume no one wants to debate it. You guys are prepared to move and second it. Any questions, any discussion? Approved. Thank you. That brings us to the quarterly reports. You've got them all. We're running quite a bit behind schedule, so I'm going to ask if there are any questions on any of them. I know in committee a lot of the material has been questioned and discussed in committee meetings. Were there any questions any director wishes to raise about any of the quarterly reports that you haven't had an opportunity to pursue offline or in committee? I see none, which is helpful. Thank you very much for that. Mary, is there anything else we have to do, or is that
No, that's it.
is that the end of the agenda in public session?
It is.
We have a contract to approve, but in closed session because it's a commercial contract. So with that, I will say to all, does any board member have anything they want to raise? I want to say again to you, John, by next time we meet, you won't be the CEO anymore, so thank you for your long and distinguished service. And may you have a very happy retirement, and you'll come back, I hope, so we can thank you properly, because you'll have just been finished by then. But we do appreciate your service and your leadership through this period. To all of you, thank you very much for attending today, and we invite you to attend in September when we next meet. May each of you find some time this summer to enjoy Ontario or parts beyond. Thank you very much.